fresh meat.
It's a game we've all played. If there was a zombie apocalypse, where would you hole up? The zombie base of your choice has to provide the best chance for fortification, have plenty of food, and offer at least some of the creature comforts of life, like a bed and a bathroom. While we've been playing that game for years, George Romero brought it to life back in 1978. Malls were becoming all the rage in the mid to late 70s. A friend of Romero's was in charge of the Monroeville Mall and offered to take him on a tour behind the scenes that most customers never see. Well, there he realized that if a zombie apocalypse ever happened, this monument to retail consumerism might be the best chance to live a comfortable life while the outside world went to hell. From that tour, 1978's Dawn of the Dead was born, but independent movies are never smooth sailing and can become an apocalypse all their own. Let's find out exactly what the happened to this horror movie. After the tremendous success of Night of the Living Dead, Romero held off on making a sequel for fear of being typecast as a horror director. While he would dabble in other horror subgenres, he wouldn't dive back into the zombie world for a decade. After his trip to the Monroe Mall, he knew he had to take on the subject. This time, he wanted to take a serious look at American consumerism. He began to see how much consumerism had become its own business. All society seemed to do anymore was to push people to make money, spend money, buy stuff. He felt this was making people into zombies all on its own. In the film, we see another view of the zombie outbreak from Night of the Living Dead. Here, the takeover has spread. Cities are being overrun with the strange plague of reanimated dead. A small group plans an escape to leave the city and eventually finds their way to an abandoned mall. Once there, they clean out the wandering zombies and set up their lives. With all the supplies they could want, they settle into a routine life within the mall's walls before outside forces begin to force their way in and destroy their sanctuary once and for all. When Romero had let it be known that he was thinking of making a sequel to his famous Living Dead movie, one fan was unbelievably excited. Italian filmmaker Dario Argento was a huge fan of Night of the Living Dead. When he heard the news that Romero was going to make a sequel, he called up the director and told him to come to Italy. There, he would be able to write the script with no distractions. Romero took him up on the offer, and over 3 weeks, he churned out pages that would eventually become Dawn of the Dead. While Argento would read the script as it was written, he offered no suggestions or critiques as he wanted it to be completely Romero's vision. The result was Romero coming up with a story that took the current societal trends to task. Instead of the old ideals of finding a job to provide food and shelter for your family, now it seemed to push people into spending as much money on material items to give the appearance of status. And if the consumer didn't have enough money, that was no problem. Just put it all on credit. This push into consumerism had turned Romero off. In his new story, the idea was so ingrained into society that even after death, the body's instincts would lead them back into the places they used to visit regularly to spend money. Well, at first, it seems to be the life-saving thing that ensures our heroes' survival. In the end, it would also be their downfall. The comfortable lifestyle would be envied enough by a group of bikers that they had to either have it for themselves or destroy it completely. Set this against the everyday humdrum of zombies wandering around the parking lot and trying to find any potential entry point, and you have the perfect metaphor for life in middle-class America in the 1970s. With the script written, Romero set out to find the money to make the film. Once again, his friend Dario Argento would step up and offer to introduce him to financiers in Italy. With this, his film was financed, but with the agreement that Argento would have the right to edit the film for foreign, non-English markets. Romero agreed, and the film was ready to start shooting. The big thing he was going to need would be a great special effects artist. Night of the Living Dead was in black and white, so it was a little easier to hide some of the makeup imperfections. Now, Romero was shooting in color and would need a completely different aesthetic for the look of the zombies and special effects. He remembered a local effects guy he wanted to hire for Night of the Living Dead, but that guy ended up being called away to go to Vietnam. Romero once again hit him up to see if he'd be interested in coming on board the film. Tom Savini instantly said yes. He had been interested in working on Night of the Living Dead, but after his tour in Vietnam as a war photographer, Savini felt it worked out for the best, as he now had seen real human physical trauma and could better recreate it for the big screen. His big decision was to color the zombies a gray color. Since Night was filmed in black and white, there is no distinction of what color the zombies actually were. He decided to lean into the look of the zombies from the last film. The audience would build an association that the two films were connected by once again seeing the undead as they sort of were in the last movie, but now the living characters would be in full color. In retrospect, he says this was a mistake, as when they ended up on film, most of the zombies looked more blue than intended. When casting the film, Romero was hesitant to hire Scott H. Reiniger as Roger. They had already cast Ken Foree, who's almost a foot taller than Reiniger. Romero loved his audition, but was worried the audience would focus too much on their height disparity. Reiniger was very blunt and just told Romero that after 15 minutes, no one in the crowd would notice that detail. The more Romero thought about this during auditions that day, the more he agreed with Reiniger. He found him and let him know he had the part. When it came to locations, Romero had decided to pursue the mall that had initially given him the idea. He asked officials at the Monroeville Mall if they could shoot there during non-business hours. Surprisingly, they agreed. Every day after the mall closed, they would set up their production and shoot all night. At around 6 a.m. every day, they would have to clean up before the mall reopened again. The mall didn't actually open until 10:30 a.m., but the overhead music would come on, and no one knew how to shut it off, so they were forced to quit shooting for the day at 6. They had initially planned on shooting through the holiday season, but when it was realized that every night they'd have to take down any Christmas decorations the mall had put up, and then put the mall back up again before the mall opened, it was deemed too much of a problem. So they stopped shooting at the mall for 3 weeks to accommodate this. Instead, they shot at a few locations outside the mall. The living quarters that the group lives in inside the mall was actually a set built at Romero's studio, The Latent Image, located in Pittsburgh. This and the elevator shaft were located at the studio. This gave them more options to shoot while not inside the mall. Walls could be moved and different angles could be achieved to give these closed-in locations a different feel than the wide-open mall courtyard. The other location used outside of the mall was the weapons store. It was a separate store that they shot at, and it was edited in such a way that it made it look like it was part of the mall. Aha, the 70s. You could grab a new pair of sneakers, head to the food court for a hot dog and a soda, and then head down to the gun store to pick yourself up any assortments of guns. America. Yeah. Savini would prove invaluable during the production. He would come up with gags on the fly. The arm in the blood pressure machine was thought of on the spot. He had a knack for grabbing things off the dinner spread and using it for exploding body parts or as an addition to the already gory effects. Originally, he had no plans on being part of the on-screen cast. He said they would be shooting, and George would say they needed someone to do a certain stunt or needed a character for part of the biker gang, and Savini would just offer to do it. He would play the character of Blades as part of the biker crew along with a real biker gang who brought their own motorcycles. They needed a stunt where someone gets thrown over the balcony. Savini offered to do it. During rehearsal, he overshot the pile of cardboard boxes he was supposed to land on. He landed on his back on the floor and had to spend the rest of the week using a golf cart on set. While Savini claims he stepped in where needed, George Romero's wife, Christine Forrest, remembers it differently. She says Savini kept bugging George to do a stunt, and that if they kept shooting the stuff Savini wanted to do, they would still be filming. One of the small stunts they did in the film might have had the biggest impact. When the character of Roger slides down the middle part of the escalator, he effortlessly slides down and goes on his way. A few years after the film came out, companies started putting metal posts at the bottom of the escalators to keep people from sliding down. While it's not proven that Dawn of the Dead inspired this, George Romero liked to think it was because of the film. Even outside of the stunts, Savini had his hands full. During production, he would show up early to put the extras in zombie makeup. After they were done, they'd go to a nearby bar to wait for the mall to close. Savini thinks this might have helped improve their staggering performance. One couple took it a little too far though, as they drank a little too much and rode off on a golf cart in the mall and crashed into a marble column that had to be fixed. Some of the extras decided to get their picture taken in the photo booth. They then replaced the example photos on the booth with their zombie ones. It gave customers the next day a little surprise when they showed up. After working for a few weeks on the film though, some of the extras started to get sick due to the zombie makeup. During the opening scenes of the film, some amputees were used in the zombie scenes to show that even with a body that seems to be incapacitated, they could still be dangerous. This worked to great effect. Savini considered the head explosion scene during this to be one of the most important effects in the film. They wanted something graphic and in your face, as that kind of stuff hadn't been done up to that point. He says that people would be taken aback and wonder if they were doing this at the beginning of the film, then what would they show them as the film went on? Not everything went according to plan though. One effect had a man biting another woman on the arm where a blood pack would be hidden. His bite would break the blood pack and spray blood all over. The zombie actor overdid his bite and actually bit part of the actress's arm. Her reaction to the bite was left in the film and is authentic. One aspect Savini wasn't happy with though was the orange color of the blood they ended up with in the film. It looked more red in person, but once on film, it ended up with a fluorescent orange appearance. Despite his annoyance over this, Romero loved it as he felt it lent to the comic book feel of the movie. Ken Foree would have his own shock on film. During the opening scenes, before the survivors get to the mall, They stop at an airfield to fuel up. While Peter is looking around the office, 2 zombie children attack him. No one bothered to tell Forey that 2 zombie children would be jumping out, and his reaction was legitimate. Never, surprise, Ken Forey. Never. Galen Ross had a great time working on the film, but one specific scene was a little hard for her. On her resume, she had said she could ice skate. The truth was that she had not skated in almost 20 years. They decided to shoot a scene where Fran was skating around the ice rink. She barely stayed on her feet long enough to get the shot. Later, she admitted to George she had lied on her resume. He laughed and shrugged. He would say she didn't have to do that scene. It wasn't that big of a deal. If anyone is interested in visiting the skating rink today to get a few laps in, you'll be disappointed to find out it no longer exists. It was replaced with a food court, so grab some Taco Bell and dream about the triple axel you would have pulled off. One thing she was confident in, though, was making Fran a strong character. Once, George instructed her to scream, and she refused. She said Fran was a strong character, and the moment she screamed, she would lose all that strength and just become another damsel in distress. Romero must have agreed with her, and he never asked her to scream again. After all the night shoots, holiday breaks, and drunken zombie extras, George would have the biggest fight of the production when he sent it off to the MPAA. They threatened to give the film an X rating. Knowing this would lump it in with porno films, he was able to talk to his distributors to release the film unrated. This was highly unusual at the time, but they agreed. A disclaimer was added to the movie poster stating that there was no explicit sex in the film, but that due to its violent content, no one under 18 would be admitted to the film. This would actually work in the movie's favor. It gave it a mystique that made moviegoers feel that they had to go see it. With the film completed, Dario Argento got his turn at editing the film for the foreign market. He felt the movie had too much humor in it. He cut a lot of it out, and what he was left with was a stark, violent movie that ended up getting an even harsher treatment overseas. It ended up being 8 minutes shorter than the US version. This cut is scored almost entirely by Argento's favorite band, Goblin. Romero ended up using some of their music in his cut, but the Argento cut has way more of their music throughout. The film would go on to be a certified classic, and is even still considered Romero's masterpiece. We all remember how the heroes fight their way through the zombies and biker gangs so a couple of them can escape in the helicopter into an uncertain future, right? Well, one of the more disputed claims is the existence of an alternate ending to the movie. While Romero agrees the original written ending was that both living characters would decide to end their own life rather than face the future, he says none of that was ever actually shot. He says that before they even shot the ending, he decided it was too bleak of an ending and decided to change it to the more ambiguous ending everyone knows. Tom Savini and effects artist Tasso and Stavrakis both claim the original ending was shot. A scene in the documentary, Document of the Dead, seems to bolster this claim, as there is a scene where Romero is walking about the mall saying that he did shoot the scene but hadn't gotten the effects shot of Peter shooting himself and Fran standing up, putting her head up into the helicopter blades. Regardless, there doesn't seem to be any footage of these shots, so it's only left to everyone's imagination. While the zombie genre has raged on since Romero's initial Night of the Living Dead, many people would agree that it doesn't get any better than his masterpiece, Dawn of the Dead. If you enjoy such things as The Walking Dead, endless zombie shooter games, or endless zombie novels, take a moment to raise a glass and say, "Thank you, George." Without him, none of them would exist. As Romero said once, war is hell until it's a party. Thank you for watching our show. If you like what you see, please subscribe to our JoBlo videos channel. Tell your friends who like this sort of content and turn on the bell to receive notifications for all our latest videos. We are an independent company and we appreciate your support.
On the soaked streets of Blue Island, and my father, though a strong man, you know, I swear I saw him crying. Another generation gone has ceased subsiding. When you say a prayer and you put him in the ground, you speak of whiskey and it's mark and bound. Ain't no new shit going down on the soaked streets of Blue Island.